I'm saying bye to all the lies and all the times you cried, saying that I wasn't right, yet I was right by your side. You manipulator, playing games, your friends commentators, and I don't know what you say about our private conversations, but it's got them hating thanks to all the rumors you be claiming. It's cool, I'm done with you, so they can throw you a celebration. You gon' hate it when you see me with somebody living better. I'm trying to tell you that me just doing me gon' have you jealous.
Hello, folks. Welcome back to Rugby Ascendant. This is Chris live in central Pennsylvania. Almost had a disaster as our broadcast started there. When I set the video up last night, I'd open up the window to get the link to share it with Dirk and with others. And as I went live, I started hearing my opening music. I'm like, uh-oh, we're going to have reverb. So I had to close a window, and it's gone now. So I did catch it. But welcome back to the program. My guest today is the Chief Executive Officer of the Solidarity Movement, Dirk Hermann. So, grüß Gott, hoe gaat dit, Dirk?
Dit gaat goed, dankie. Nice Afrikaans.
Well, it wasn't much. I try. The problem is, I start getting conversations and people keep talking to me. They get a little fast. I'm like, oh, no. Ek praat nie Afrikaans nie. And they're like, yeah, you just spoke it. Anyway, so listen, this is a very apropos topic. Thanks for coming in. Solidarity, of course, is a civil rights organization and a union, labor movement, many different things that is opposed to at least some of the pieces in this bill. Now, this Basic Education Laws Amendment Bill, which was signed by President Ramaphosa this past Friday, is stoking a lot of concern, as it did when it came up before Parliament in May. So what folks need to know first off the bat, that there's an existing law for education, and this is an amendment to the existing law. It's not a whole new system, but with all the changes in this amendment, it might as well be a new system. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's absolutely so. It is actually a radical change in the South African education law. And the most important part of that is it is giving much more power to the state, to the central government. And that is part of the bigger problem in South Africa. That's an ideological problem. Ideological problem that we fight on different levels, and where we see that the state more and more wants to centralize, although they can't govern. And that puts us in a tremendous predicament in South Africa. It's not only education, it is also institutions and other state institutions where the states want more and more power. And that puts us in a very difficult position. But it is exactly the same with education now. They use this specific new act to get more powers to the state, because they want to control. And that's the central theme in the act, is more state control. In this specific case, of course, more state control over parents, more state control over children. And that is more severe than state control over an institution like, for instance, electricity supply in South Africa, because this is about children. In this specific case, they now say that where we have we had a more cooperative education model, where there was nice cooperation between the school governing bodies, and of course they represent the parents and the state. There was a cooperative model. Now they change it, and they make it much more of a state-driven school, where the state now suddenly can decide on, for instance, something like a language policy. And of course, for us as an Afrikaans community, it has tremendous consequences. If you have a state official that can prescribe what language you can use in a specific school, and of course, that has a lot of implications, because suddenly the state will determine what must be taught in a school, what kind of values must be taught in the school. And suddenly you get a centralized government that wants to control who you are. And I think that is the central problem that we have with this new act. It's not a bill anymore. You are quite correct. Ramaphosa signed it. It was quite a dramatic week last week. We can talk about that. But yes, it is signed, although certain parts are not enacted yet.
Well, it is a fair point that you make there, Dirk, about the challenges there. But there's a couple points here that come up, and let me share my thoughts, because it is a conversation, not simply an interview. People get lost on that. Let your guest talk. Let your guest talk. Well, I do let my guest talk, but it's a conversation, the Adaba conversation with Chris. So let's go to the conversation portion of this. So from my perspective, I'm a polyglot. I speak 6 languages. 3 of them are African. And I was fluent in most of them, but I'm fluent probably about 3 or 4 now because I don't use them all the time. But I believe in language. I believe in the power of language, and I think it's healthy for kids to learn a second language if they can. But the bottom line is this: is we've seen this time and again across the planet. Language is directly tied to culture, and culture matters. And when you go after a language, you destroy culture. And that was one of the big arguments in 76 and 85 with the imposition of Afrikaans as a medium of instruction in schools. And the reason why we had riots, at least in 76, arguably in 85, that was the proximate cause. But others might say it was already a revolution that was planned for, and that was just the spark. But I could just turn to my own country, the United States. For decades, the government, thinking it knew best, the central government, decided that Native American kids must come to schools to be taught how to be proper Westerners and wear shoes and wear ties and shave and go to school and learn the modern parts of life in the West. And it had an eviscerating impact on the culture of the Navajo, the Arapaho, all the different Native American groups who sent their kids here. And then there's some famous people who went to these schools, like Jim Thorpe, of course, the most famous Olympian, went to the Carlisle School right down here where I used to work at the War College. But, I mean, this is terrible. And we see it in South Africa with the disappearance of languages. The Khoi language, Nul, has one speaker left, and her name is Oma Katarina Esau. She lives in Uppington. She's like 88, almost 89 years old. She's the last known first language speaker. And when you kill a language, you kill a culture. Things are lost. And the thing about languages is they're amazing, unique. It's part of the diversity of life. And this effort, ironically, by the way, Dirk, I'll let you come on this too. Ironically, the ANC's fond of complaining about colonialism. You know, and Helen Zille famously got in a lot of hot water a few years ago for saying that colonialism brought some good things to South Africa. And you can argue for and against her point. But anytime you mention colonialism, it's usually meant as a slur or an attack on people who have fair skin pigmentation. But the irony here is that English is the ultimate colonial language. I mean, is it not? I mean, they colonized us. We speak English now, and India speaks English. And only about 7% of South Africans are first language speakers of English. Yet they want to impose it on the Venda, the Xhosa, the Zulu, the Khoi, the San, the Sotho, the Swazi, all these different groups in South Africa. And if these mother tongues are lost, you become a homogenous society eventually. Am I wrong on any of my points? Your turn.
You are quite correct. The fact is that you said that around about 93% of South Africans do not speak English as a first tongue. But if you have a situation where 93% of South Africans must learn in a language that they are not fluent with, it has a tremendous influence on several levels. The first level is that you are killing the basic use of languages. So that is the first plan. First place, you are killing languages. But it's not only that. The second one is you are killing quality education, because the fact of the matter is that especially abstract concepts like maths and science, it's very difficult to teach that in another language. So you actually deprive a kid from quality education if it's not mother tongue education. That means that 93% of South Africans, you will deprive them from quality education if you force down English as an language of instruction. And the problem is the failure of government is that they did not stimulate quality education via mother tongue education among other language groups in South Africa, to the detriment of education of other kids. And if you look at the South African jobless figures, a figure the highest in the world, and one of the reasons for that is, of course, lack of mother tongue education. There's a direct link between quality entrance to the labor market and mother tongue education. So that's the second part. And then the third part is what you refer to. And that is that education is also about culture. So you are killing kids' culture. Not only be Afrikaans kids' culture that you kill, it's other kids' cultures that you also kill. And suddenly you sit here with problems with identity. Who am I? Can I? If my language can't, can I? And that is that kind of problems that you sit in a country of like South Africa. So it's a tremendous problem if you force down one colonial language on 93% of South Africans. that actually don't speak that specific language. There was resistance against that in the past in South Africa. Of course, this resistance started way back, actually before the Anglo-Boer War, but especially after the Anglo-Boer War. Afrikaners stood up because then the English wanted to force down English as the colonial language on Afrikaners. Then they started own schools, private driven schools. And the problem was, if you speak Afrikaans if you spoke Afrikaans in a school, they will hang a specific thing around your neck,
a placard,
a placard around your neck, and it says, "I'm a donkey," because you speak another language. So this language battle come a long time in South Africa, and like you said, the ANC themselves started with protests and violence against Afrikaners and the National Party that wanted to force down Afrikaans in schools. That's a long tradition of actually in South Africa fighting against the fact that you force down a language. Now you sit with the government, and here they come and they want to do it again. They want, via this bill, to force schools and to instruct schools to change their language policies. And it's wrong on several levels.
Well, there's a couple points here I'd like to unpack, and the first is that it's comical to watch ANC leadership on the dais as the president signs it, chuckling and laughing and ululating for them to have this going on. Additionally, sorry, my internet got stuck there. Additionally, are you still there?
Recording in progress.
Are you still there?
I'm here.
Okay, I got disconnected or something. That was weird.
For some reason, yes.
Yeah, that's
but I'm still here.
Okay, well,
yeah.
hang on. That was weird. I've got it, and I can't get Zoom back. I got to mess around with here the window. Give me a second here. Wow, what happened there? That's bizarre. Okay. There we go. Okay. Sorry about that, folks. Are you still with me there? Wow, my internet disappeared. That was bizarre. Are we still online? Can I get a 5x5 by folks watching the program? If you can tell me you can hear us very quickly. It looks like we're back there. Yeah, it's very strange. I'm not talking about Biden, and so usually that's when the buffering starts. But okay, all right. So people, yeah, exactly. No, we laugh, but it's true. Look, this channel is clearly shouted, but Willem Petzer just came on. Apparently, did a video. Hasn't done a video on YouTube in ages. Got 25,000 views talking about this. I'm talking about somebody who's a subject matter expert, who's involved in the legal process or trying to deal with this, who knows what they're talking about. PhD, multiple author. And we aren't going to get 25,000 views, I'll tell you that, but we'll hope for it. Anyway, so let's get back to what I was saying. So where I left off, the 2 points I was trying to make, Dirk, were that they're celebrating, ululating, they're doing that. Maybe they thought that was a copyright strike. I got somebody's music by doing that. Who knows? But that's why they cut me off. But we've got that going on. And the irony here is that they are doing exactly what the National Party did. Their excuse is to even out education outcomes, but that's not what they're doing here. They've had 30 years to fix this. And education historically has been the largest or second largest amount of money spent by the ANC government. Where has it gone? Education outcomes have gone down. The quality of education of the graduate from schools in South Africa is abysmal. 30% pass rate for 3 subjects, 40% in your first language. Who in their right mind thinks that someone getting 40% in Xhosa qualifies you to go on to tertiary education? But that's the situation we have. This bill doesn't address any of that. In fact, in my view, it does the opposite of what a lot of people in South Africa want. Many people in South Africa are calling for a federal system like the Swiss canton or the U.S. federal system. And instead, the ANC is behaving like the pull-up bureau, trying to amass more and more power at the top for what I would argue, Dirk, is a cabal of incompetence that is epic. They have had control of everything and they destroyed almost everything. What have I gotten wrong?
If you look at the school system in South Africa, you will see that around about 85% of schools in South Africa are actually dysfunctional. And that is because of a state that actually imploded. So the fact is that there's the problem. Now they want to come after schools that still are in a very good, teach actually on a very high level. Actually, in fact, is excellence.
Dirk, sorry, let me interrupt for just a second. They want to come after schools, and sorry to interrupt you, but the argument they're making, and this is I think this is a racist argument, is that those are schools that offer Connors because they're favored or because they were given advantage and it's unfair. They still have an advantage 30 years later. I think that's a dishonest argument. I know it's a dishonest argument, but that's part of the argument they're making, correct?
Well, the irony here is that the reason why Afrikaans schools are excellent is because it's mother tongue schools. The fact is that these kids in these schools are actually being taught in their own language, and so that they can actually do quite good in subjects like science and maths, etc. And the second reason is because it's their own language, there's also values that is carried over in their language. So the fact is there's good education because of the fact that it's mother tongue education. That is why they are good. Now the irony is they say, you are good, we want to take that away. The fact is that 85% of the schools in South Africa are dysfunctional. And one of the main reasons for that is because they teach that poor kids in a language that they are not fluent with at all. In certain parts of South Africa, the kids can't speak English at all, but they must be taught in English. And then they ask, why are those schools actually dysfunctional? And they say, well, you are functional because it's because of advantages of the past. The fact of the matter is, it's better educational methods. It's mother tongue education. So that's the problem in South Africa. And they want to take that away now. If you look at the other problem where government failed, we see a tremendous growth in population in South Africa, especially in schools. In Gauteng is the best example. But Panyaza Lesufi, the guy that is actually driven this whole new policy, when he was the Minister of Education in Gauteng, he's now the Premier. In his period of time, he did not build schools. There's 7 less schools in South Africa. In Gauteng, schools closed down under his governance. So the fact is that they fail South African kids. And that must be rectified. They must go back and say, what can we do to better education in South Africa? And this bill does not address that at all.
Well, I think, Dirk, and please, again, if I'm wrong, correct me. I think one of the problems here, and I noticed this early on, and I'll go back to the year 2000, on my first visit to Stellenbosch. I was in Stellenbosch in August of 2000, and there was a store in Stellenbosch, right in the heart of the town there, called the Träumerei. And for those who speak German, you know it comes from dream. Traum is dream. The Träumerei, a little knick-knack, gift shop. I walked in, and the lady was in there, and of course I speak German, and I said something in German. She answered, and it turns out that the owner, her grandfather, was Röntgen, the guy who came up with discovering the X-rays, back in the day. But her family had immigrated to South Africa, and so she was an Afrikaner. But she was a school teacher. Middle school teacher and or high school, and this was just 6 years after the new dispensation. Well, she was politely told it was time to go, and was given a payout package and was forced out of teaching. And this one example I give you was prevalent throughout South Africa. Many qualified teachers were pushed out of the system over 20 years ago, and that created a gap of largely unqualified people who came in based on skin pigmentation and were given jobs as teachers. And particularly see this bad cases in KwaZulu-Natal, where unqualified male teachers prey on prepubescent and pubescent girls, and girls get marks based on whether they sleep with a teacher or not. All kinds of negative outcomes here, and there was no control, no discipline. Experienced administrators and principals were no longer in the school system. I believe that has had a cumulative effect on the quality of education in South Africa, just another factor. I don't know if you want to comment or if you want to tell me if I'm wrong, but feel free to do, or any comments on that.
Yes, South Africa is the most racialized country in South Africa. Our racism is institutionalized. And if you look at what happened at that time, there was a period in South Africa, especially in the public service, where they had a policy of what they call space creation packages. And via space creation packages, they offered packages for white public servants to leave the public service with the view to create space for transformational candidates. The problem is what they did not take into account is institutional knowledge. So they've lost thousands of years of institutionalized knowledge. That it was like that in the school system. I will say a bit more about that. But it was also in other institutions, like for instance, Eskom, the electricity supplier. They had also this system of what they call space creation. They paid out around about 2 billion rand in the form of packages to get rid of white public servants for the case of transformation. And now South Africa has a huge electricity problem, and everyone agree now it's because of the fast flow out of knowledge out of the public service. It's exactly the same what they what they did in education, and that put a lot of pressure on the educational institutions in South Africa because of the race ideology of the country. What they do now is, according to this act, they say that if a school can, and parents can choose, of course, their own language of instruction at a specific school, like in the past, but then they say a state official then can come and they look at the larger race composition of the bigger educational district, and then based on that, they can instruct a school then to change their composition and to change their language. So they use a race criteria, well knowing that Afrikaans, for instance, is a minority language, and we are a minority in every educational district in South Africa. So they use a race proxy and they apply it then to the schools, and then at the end of the day, there will be no Afrikaans schools left because they use a majority race demographics and apply it on a minority. And they say, well, because of that, we will change the composition of the schools. And that is part of the problem in South Africa. It is centralized race planning. They do it with schools, they do it with companies, they do it with every sector, they do it with schools, they do it with sport, they do it with every sector of South Africa. And that's nothing else than social engineering. And so they plan the South Africa society from a centralized point of view with legislation. And that's exactly what they did here. There's nothing different from this ideology than they done with the rest of the public service. They did it with hospitals in South Africa. Now we have a dysfunctional hospital system. We have a dysfunctional school system. We have a dysfunctional electricity supplier. And that is all because they want to plan centrally. And we know there's no example in the whole of the world where centralized planning led to better government. And you must see this specific act in that context. It's part of their comprehensive social engineering.
Well, Dirk, we're going to shift to some other aspects of the BELA bill here in a few moments. But look, I have to say, in all honesty, I think you're being overly sensitive. I mean, what are you upset about? The centralized planning of the ANC's Politburo, National Executive Committee has been very successful. South Africa is achieving 0.4% annual GDP growth. Unemployment is kept just below 80% for youth, 60% for the country. We have 30% passing marks, rapes off the chart, gender-based violence. South Africa now has 50% more murders per year than the United States, a country 6 times as large. I think that the ANC central planning aspects have worked very well in building South Africa. What are you so upset about? You seem to be overly sensitive.
If you look at the South Africa and you look at how many rich billionaires was made through this centralized planning, I'm quite convinced that there's a couple of thousand people in South Africa that will agree with you. But then there's 60 million that won't agree.
Oh, they're not caterers. What do we care? They're not caterers. That statement right there says a lot about it. Hey, let's shift very quickly here. We'll get back to language because that's so important. But reading through the draft of the bill a few months back, and boy, that was, some good, sleep-inducing reading there. But reading through the bill a few months back, I did see an inclusion of this thing in there about criminalizing parents if their children are truant. And I've seen this done before where societies put parents in jail because their kids aren't in school. To me, that's not a solution. And also criminalizing your parent because a child doesn't go to school seems to be rather counterproductive. Maybe there's a reason kids aren't in school. Maybe there's gangs. Maybe the schools are lame. Maybe not learning anything. But to be fair, and I'll admit this, and you can comment on this, there are parents who are irresponsible, who care nothing about their children, just let them run wild and don't make sure that they're in school. But to be fair, my experience, whether it's in Botswana, South Africa, Liberia, where people take all of their money just to send their kids to pay for school fees, and in America, parents, by and large, make sure their kids go to school. So I think criminalizing parents over this is wrong-headed. Have I gotten something wrong on that issue in the bill? Or the law, I should say now.
Yeah, it's now law. Of course, there must be regulations, especially if it comes to education. There must be a framework within which education must take place. Any country has that. But the problem is if you come and you criminalize parents, that's the problem. And in general, my experience from the ANC government, and it sounds like a paradox, they hate freedom. And they want to centralize, they want to take away freedom, and they want to centralize that in their hand. They believe that if you centralize, then you can control. And of course, then this absurd idea of equality that flows from that. They say that we must centralize all goods, and then we will decentralize, and via that, everyone will be equal after that. That is the absurd idea. That is, of course, is an idea away from freedom, but they call it freedom.
No, it's not freedom, man. It's Soviet-style control, turning us all into serfs. I mean, as if we're all kulaks, I mean, I don't have a chicken and a cow at the present, so I'm not a kulak, but that would make me a kulak in Stalin's Ukraine back in the 1930s and make me a target for liquidation. Look, I'm not trying to say the ANC is liquidating South Africans, but what I am saying is that this is wrong-headed, it's a wrong approach, and it is anti-liberty. I spent 36 and a half years in the Army defending our Constitution. I did it because I believed in our Constitution, which guarantees natural human rights. Things like the right to freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of worship, right to seek redress from your government. All these things are natural rights. And the ANC seems very much allergic to these sort of things. They don't want dissension. They don't want people to speak. They just want to put a veneer of freedom out there. And they're actually usurping your freedom. They're taking away choice. That's true freedom when you have choice. I mean, we're seeing it coming, Dirk, with the national health insurance garbage that's coming as well. Yeah, now you know my position. I called it garbage. It's going to usurp the private health sector on the excuse that it's unfair that people have private health care. What the ANC government doesn't realize, one of the reasons why they went down to 40% in this last election is that there's a large and growing black middle class in South Africa who have health benefits through their insurers, whether it's Discover or someone else. And they were taken aback by the thought that they would no longer have access to that when they've worked their way into a system and they've earned it. They seem to not understand the impact of some of their policies, or they just don't care. It's like cutting your nose off to spite your face. What do you think?
You will hear the central theme, and you emphasize the central theme. And the central theme is a government that wants to centralize more and more. The National Health Insurance is an excellent example of that, where they, although they are responsible for the implosion of the public service system in South Africa, they believe they must now take control of all. And they are responsible for the fact that certain people in South Africa does not have access to quality healthcare, because under their watch it imploded, and they are responsible for that. And now they say, well, let's centralize more. And we also, of course, have a legal action against government on that as well. So we already submitted papers, so it's going to be a huge battle against the government on the national health insurance as well. But it is exactly the same principle. This bill, we're also going to fight in court, and most probably. There is, we can say something about the negotiations that took part last week. But most probably we will go to court on this one as well. So we are in a constant fight against the centralization of the state. But we react in two ways on that. In the first place, we fight government. We will go to court and we will say we are against state centralism, and because it takes away freedom. But we are in another position as well. Because remember, we are not in a position where we can vote ourselves out of this specific dilemma. In America, you are now mobilizing for an election in November, and you say to the people, let's vote ourselves out of the problem. We can't do that. We can't vote ourselves out of the problem. We can do two things. We can fight ourselves out of the problem, and we do it. That is why we go to court. Or we can build ourselves out of the problem. And it's actually both. So we fight government, and we try to fight this tendency of state centralism. But on the other side, we have also a policy where we build new things. So we are now in a process, and we will make new announcements in a couple of weeks on a huge build project that we will have to build private schools. In reaction to the government centralization, we say as a community, we take self-responsibility and we built a future. When the state came and they took away our universities, there's none Afrikaans universities left in South Africa. We said, all right, we will fight that, but then we built a new university. We are now in a process building a new campus, about 3.2 billion rand that we must mobilize via the community. We built a new campus. When the government came and they took literally every technical college, centralized that, make it English, and it imploded. What did we do? Well, of course, we fought it, but we did another thing. We built a new college, Soltech. And that is now one of the best colleges in South Africa, ironically, and we built it with our own money. Members of ours donated everyone 10 rand a month to build Soltech. And ironically, the government brought over a couple of months ago a group from the German government, and they showed them only two technical colleges in South Africa, Mercedes-Benz and Soltech, our college. They did not take them to the state colleges, they took them to our college. We will do that with schools, we will do that with universities, with technical colleges, etc. So that is how one react on that. In our circumstances, we fight and we build. And that is why we're going to stay here forever as Afrikaners here in the southern tip of Africa. We know how to survive Africa. We're going to do it again. This act, we will fight politically, in courts, but we will build as well.
Well, you actually make a point there. You talk about something. I saw the documentary that was produced by Ernst van Zyl from AfriForum called Self-Bestuur, self-reliance, really, I think is how we translate that in English. I had to be careful because I kept saying selbst because I speak German. It's not selbst in Afrikaans, it's self. Yeah. So, to me, it looks like it should be Selbstbestuur, but anyway, so I had a hard time with it. But I did see that, and it's self-reliance, essentially. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. I have been to Soltech on a couple of occasions. I have toured it. I've interviewed the folks there. It's an incredible school that does great work, and it was built on time, early, and under budget, if I'm not mistaken, something that the ANC government is unable to do.
It was in the middle of the COVID pandemic.
Yeah, that too. You should mention that. Yeah, it was in the COVID. Folks, you're listening to Dr. Dirk Hermann, the Chief Executive Officer of the Solidarity Movement in South Africa, an umbrella organization that has many, I don't want to say tentacles, that has a negative connotation for an octopus, but many different subordinate organizations, including AfriForum. And before we go any further, one of those, of course, is academia. That's the university that Solidarity has built. I've been to that. They're currently using a disused hotel campus, I guess it is. That's where they were at. But I was there. Many of my viewers keep asking me to go be a lecturer there, but I don't speak Afrikaans well enough to be a lecturer there. I'd have to go to the primary school and be a student for my Afrikaans. But I don't know. Maybe they have visiting professors who are political scientists. And
don't worry. We just last week or 2 weeks ago, we had a delegation from Hillsdale. University, and they were there. They gave guest lectures, so you're welcome to come and give us a guest lecture in English. Well, maybe not in German.
Well, there you go, folks. No, but people like, why don't you come work for academia? Like, well, I don't live in Pretoria or Centurion or anywhere around there. I'm a little far away, but I do make visits, so maybe we can do that at some point if I'm welcome. But can I get you very quickly here, Dirk? Because not everybody understands what solidarity is. I mean, I have to be honest with you, in the context of South Africa, when I first heard of solidarity, I thought, well, it must be an offshoot of, Lech Walesa and Solidarność, of course, which is my coming of age. And it was, you're, I think, a couple years younger than me, but coming of age, that was solidarity to me. And that's what's always stuck in my mind, going back to 1980 timeframe. But solidarity in South Africa has been around since the early 20th century, if I'm not mistaken. Can you give us just a quick description of what solidarity is for the audience members that are unfamiliar with it?
Solidarity is quite an old institution. We were formed in 1902, and that was just after the Anglo-Boer War. And of course, after the Anglo-Boer War, Afrikaners, or Boers, like we are also called, had to try to stand up after this devastating war. 32,000 of our women and children were killed in concentration camps. And there was a scorched earth policy of the English, and then we had to try to stand up. So different institutions were formed at that stage. One of them with the Transvaal Miners Association, that's actually us. And then we had a long history through the South African history. But the most very important date was in 1997. Then Flip Buys, the current chairperson of the biggest solidarity movement, was elected as the general secretary of the trade union. And then he said that we must react on what's going to happen in South Africa. And that was quite ironic, because that was just after 1994. It was the Mandela era. Everyone thought, well, it is history in making. It's a dream come true. And Flip said, well, if I look at the ideology of the ANC, they can't govern. They have a struggle ideology, not the ideology of governance. So we must create another alternative, and we must do it via the community. So then we've started to build a movement. I also started in 1997 there. At that stage, the trade union was literally bankrupt. And then we said we must get answers on the other side of the state. So we started to build institutions, and we, of course, the labor movement, we first make sure that it gets sound. And then we started to build other institutions, for instance, Saltic, the technical college, the Solidarity Helping Hand, the social leg. And then we've built academia. Then we built a media institution, Marula Media, and Marula Media is now the biggest media house in Afrikaans in South Africa. And then we started with a school movement that support schools in South Africa. They will also be responsible for the new school system, the private school system that we will announce in a couple of weeks. And then we built the institution, and there's now around about 700,000 people, members of this movement. We also then brought in AfriForum. Established AfriForum. AfriForum takes responsibility for civil rights and safety and municipal services. And so we brought in the movement, the Federation of Afrikaans Cultural Institutions. So it's a big movement now, 700,000 people. We have an annual budget now of 1.5 billion rand. But we plan big build projects to come as well. For instance, a new university campus, etc. So it's a very vibrant answer for a centralized state. And Some people say it's a state within a state. It's not exactly what it is, because we are not a state, but we are a whole movement taking self-responsibility. The fact is, we must survive in Africa. We can't go anywhere. We are Afrikaners. We are called after Africa. Our language developed here. And the fact is, we must survive here. And that is what we do via the movement. We make sure that we can survive here for us and our children. We can't go to the Netherlands or back to Germany, France, anywhere. We are from here. And that is the reason why this whole school battle is so important for us.
Well, 100%. So, we've discussed previously in this conversation, we've talked about the language impact, which we'll probably talk about before we close again. Also, I brought up the issue of criminalizing parents' behavior by not getting kids in school when they're truant. Are there any other aspects of that bill that people should be aware of? Because the big focus, the media presents this as angry white people who are just upset because they don't want the ANC to do things and they want their own private schools where they get special privileges. That's how it comes across in the media. And as I've pointed out, it's much more than language. There's other pieces of this bill. So are there any other aspects we really should discuss here? One of my viewers asked something about abortion. I don't know where that came from. I don't recall that in the bill, but what are some of the other aspects of the new law that we should be really concerned about, Dirk?
I think there's two that I want to mention, and the one is the overregulation of homeschooling, and that was never like that. But I assume, of course, if you have homeschoolers, there must be kind of regulation. You can't be 100% free. There must be some framework within which you must operate. But this is an absolute over-regulation. It takes away that freedom of parents, and my expectation is it's going to end up in court as well, that specific element. But then there's another element, and that is previously schools simply took responsibility to buy their own stock. All that is necessary on a local school level in the local community. And suddenly they have now a centralized system that you can only, via the central state, do any purchases for your specific school. Now, that is a system of centralized plundering. Not and that is another aspect that is for me that is of real concern. So it's actually the three big issues is, of course, the school governing bodies rights that is taken away and that is erudited to the central state. That is the one. The second one is I think the whole central buying of purchase, and then the last one is the overregulation of school homeschooling, and then I think what you've mentioned, the criminalization. If you don't take your kid to school already in grade 0.
Well, it's interesting because, look, if you're in the corporate world and you're Amazon or you're, Ford, and you have centralized purchasing, it can have a beneficial impact because you have you have mass, you have volume, you can get things cheaper. If you're buying 10,000 widgets instead of 5 widgets, you get a better deal. But the reality is here, the corporate world is very different. Amazon is homogenized. Everybody works for Amazon. They have the same standards. They wear the same outfits. They meet the same rules. But Venda and Swati and Afrikaners and those who don't consider themselves Afrikaners but consider themselves Boers and Zulu and Xhosa and Tswana are all very different people and have different traditions, and those things impact how school and what goes on around them. And if you homogenize this at a national level, once again, we come back to, and I'm going to use the word, it was used a lot when it comes to farm murders, plasmod. It was overplayed in the press, the concept of genocide, which I refuted, and I said it's rural insecurity and violence, and it affects everybody, but disproportionately farmers. But I will use the term cultural genocide because to me, that's what's in play here. I mean, you're not supposed to be taking Cheyenne and making them good little Western boys and girls. You're supposed to allow them to develop as Cheyenne, and they can learn English and they can perform in the modern world, and it can be a Venda and the same thing. But this is what I would call cultural genocide, and this homogenization of things to make it all the same washes out all the uniqueness of everything. Again, Amazon can do that. Walmart can do that. Massmart can do that because that gives them an advantage. But doing that to people, it's like I'm watching Soylent Green. Soylent Green are people.
It's absolutely so. The other problem in South Africa, of course, is that we, in the past 30 years, we have an absolute long tradition, I can say, of central plundering. Everything that is centralized get plundered. And if you have a system of centralized buying, of purchasing, then you can know it will be plundered. And that is one of the huge problems in South Africa. It's an area of corruption. And so that is part of the problem. What you said about that if you try to centralize, manipulate a society, and you want to take away all other languages, and you want to force down a language that is not spoken by 93% of people, then you are killing culture. They already actually, I think they are in the process of killing the traditional African cultures, because they are taking away their education and force English down on them. And now they want to do it with Afrikaans as well.
Well, Dirk, a question for you here, and I'm curious to say, I'm familiar with Solidarity. I've been to your headquarters there. I've interviewed folks there. I've met you there, and others. I met Kali and others, and I've also, of course, been at Reform and met them on this side of the Atlantic, in fact. But the question I have here, and one thing I frequently raise a question when I talk to people from your organization, is that the perception is that it's for an Afrikaners only organization. The argument I've made, and again, please correct me if I'm wrong, the argument I've made is that while that may be the focus, because that's the creation organization going back to its roots, you do things that are beneficial to all South Africans. Would it not be perhaps be beneficial in light of the struggle right now to get this law changed or suspended? Would it not be beneficial for Solidarity Movement and others to say, hey, listen, we're doing this on behalf of others, and engage with the Tswana community, engage with the Xhosa community? Would that not be a wise strategic move, or is it something outside your writ?
No, definitely. We actually do it. We have a lot of bridging projects in other areas as well. Like you say, is that what we do is on behalf of South Africa and South Africans as well. Let's take, for instance, like our fights against centralized governing. It's not only to our benefit, it's to the benefit of all. If we fight the national health insurance, the fact is that most South Africans that will be hit hardest by a national health insurance system that is driven by this corrupt and incompetent government will be Black South Africans. If AfriForum goes out and fix potholes, and then they don't only go out and fix Afrikaner potholes, they fix all potholes. There's not a thing like Afrikaner potholes. Or if they, if in this specific case, if we fight for mother tongue education, it's not only to the benefit of Afrikaners, it's to benefit to all kids that want to be taught in their mother tongue. Yesterday, I had a discussion with a Black South African, he from Alexandra, and he said, please, they want to join this specific specific fight. And most probably we will announce that in next week. We'll have a joint press conference of Black and white South Africans that feel exactly the same. The Cape Forum last week, they are organized among colored South Africans in the Western Cape. They are also Afrikaans, but not from the not white people that speak Afrikaans, Coloureds, and they also said that they want to join the fight against this specific act. So actually, if you look at this, 93% of all South Africans must fight this kind of state centralism and must say that we want schools in our own languages.
Well, let me ask this question. As you go forward here, there was a city press report that came out a couple of days ago talking about Kali Kriel and mentioning you as by name as well, detailing what they purport to be a history. And I'm not refuting it or confirming it. That's why I'm asking you, saying that that John Steenhuisen from the Democratic Alliance approached the president, said, I don't know the words, but let's say, please, Mr. President, before you go forward with this, could you discuss this issue with the folks from Solidarity? Because there's some real concerns here that affect South Africans. And okay, I'm being very polite. I don't know what the conversation was, but the news, the press is reporting that both you and Kali had an impact. I don't know if you talked directly to President Ramaphosa or their intermediaries. Is in fact that a true story, or is that just fake news?
No, that's a true story. President Ramaphosa contacted us. He knows about our resistance at this specific against this specific act, and that, of course, when the government of national unity was formed after the last elections, we had discussions with the ANC, we had discussions with the Freedom Front Plus, we had discussions with the Democratic Alliance, and we said that we will support in principle a government of national unity, but we have two red lines. The one red line is this BELA Act, and the other red line is the national health insurance. If this government of national unity continues with these two pieces of legislation, you can expect resistance from us as Solidarity Movement, and of course AfriForum as well. You can expect resistance of us against the new national government of national unity. So when it then happened that we see this BELA bill is going to be signed last Friday, we started to mobilize, and we had a big press conference. We contacted John Steenhuisen and Helen Zille and Peter Groenewald from the Freedom Front. We also write to the ANC and say, listen, you must understand, this is a red line for us. For the Democratic Alliance and the Freedom Front Plus, it's a bit of a dilemma because our members are their biggest supporters. 90% of our members vote for the DA and the Freedom Front Plus, so they knew that they can't actually afford to lose our support. So then John Steenhuisen asked the President Ramaphosa, to contact us. So President Ramaphosa then called Kali Kriel, the head of AfriForum, and he called me as well. Two different phone calls. So we had the discussions on this specific act. He asked me, what's your central problem? And I said that you must understand that if you let this act go through, we will see it as a deed of aggression against Afrikaans. We will see it as a break of trust, and we will mobilize against the specific government of national unity. And it will have also an impact on the role that the DA and the Freedom Front play in the national government of national unity. So we had quite a long discussion. The last time that we spoke then was Friday night at about 10 o'clock South African time, Thursday night, about 10 o'clock South African time. It was the night before this act was supposed to be signed. And President Ramaphosa said then to me that I must send a settlement proposal. So I did that. So on Friday morning, 6 o'clock, he received that. And then he looked at us and he called Kali first and then me as well. And then he said, all right, he's going to sign this specific act, but two specific articles, the one about language and submissions, that is the big bones of contention, you will not enact for 3 months. What now happens is in the next 3 months, we will have hardcore negotiations with government on those specific articles. So the fact is, although the act is signed now, it's not enacted yet, and the kept open a window. He tried to manage the resistance, and our resistance was big, and it's going to be even larger in the next couple of months. And so the fact is that the ANC then said that they are prepared to talk to us still in the next 3 months. So that is true, yes.
Well, it definitely shows the influence of solidarity. I mean, I don't recall the last time President Ramaphosa called me. Probably because my first question would be related to Pala Pala. I'm just saying, but that's a different topic. But anyway, back to the point here. So, it's I think the thing for me that's very disturbing about this from an education standpoint, and I wasn't homeschooled. I went to public schools. I'm a product of it. And I went, I think I have a better argument than most people and better experience. I attended well over 30 primary and elementary schools in my first 6-7 years of education. So, I mean, constantly moving. So I know what it's like, and I know what good schools are like, I know bad schools are like, and rich neighborhoods or upper income and dirt poor, ghetto neighborhoods. I lived in all those places. And also I've studied every possible means you can, at secondary, at tertiary school, through in residence, through distance learning, through correspondence, everything you can imagine. But the thing I'm concerned about here in this law is the attack on homeschooling. We've had the same thing happening here in America, an effort to centralize and control homeschooling. It's been fought at the state level and successfully by people trying to protect kids. And the national government has tried to play the same role that the ANC is doing here with centralization of education. Local folks should be the ones deciding this. In the United States, we have school boards, and people get voted onto it in elections. That's how you get on the school board. And in South Africa, you have something similar. That's not the school board.
Similar.
What's it called?
Yeah, it's similar. It's school governing bodies. School
governing bodies. Yeah, it's the same sort of activity, but it's a place where parents are engaged. Look, we recently had here in the local high school, which, by the way, soaks me for a lot of tax money. But the local high school here, we had this big issue of transgender bathrooms, and oh my goodness, you should have seen the turnout of hundreds of parents and also activists who showed up, and a number of students who attend the school and past students who were there to discuss this. And the board met, and eventually they decided in a 5-4 decision. They made a decision in a democratic fashion. But taking that's control of school boards. But the homeschool, I don't know if people know about homeschooling, but it's not like kids just stay home and the parents throw a book at them. There's a regimen. There's associations. There's certification. It's a really well done. And we've seen here in America that educational outcomes for homeschool students tend to be significantly better when going off to university than those in public school.
It's actually, the problem is on the two sides. On two sides. In the first place, we had of course, the school governing bodies, like I said, the SGBs. And on the one side, they want to take away the control of those parents, because suddenly the state official can instruct those parents to change the admission policy and the language policy. So that is to take away their power. And then the same happening with homeschoolers. They also want to centralize them. So suddenly they take control or not only of homeschoolers, but also of traditional schools. So on both of them, the problem is centralization, taking away of freedom.
I think ultimately that's really where it all comes down here. And that's what people need to understand, whether they live in Alexandria or they live in Stellenbosch or Sandton, or they live in Kailicha in the Cape Flats. This is about control. It's about bureaucrats deciding what your life is, how you live your life, what language you speak, how you're educated. And there's a question in the chat a few moments ago asking who drafted this bill. I know it's the brainchild of Angie Motshekga, these days known as Minister 30% by many people derisively, but it's something that she didn't get to fruition implemented until after she was no longer the Minister for Education, where she spent years presiding over declining educational outcomes. But ultimately, it's about central control. And again, I think I've decided to stop calling the ANC's National Executive Committee that and start calling it the Politburo, because that's how it behaves. Dirk, you've been very kind with your time here. I'd like to give you the floor. And is there any other topics you can discuss on BELA? We brought up a number of issues. If not any other topics or nuances of the law that we need to discuss. And I'll give you a few minutes to wrap up and give us your thoughts on where we go from here.
Yes. Well, where we go from here is that we, of course, will fight this specific act with everything that we have. We will mobilize our people. We will mobilize our parents. And we will put pressure on government, especially in the next 3 months. The next 3 months will be crucial. There will be hardcore bargaining. And we know hardcore bargaining. We do that. We come from a trade union tradition, so we will enter into that hardcore with government in the next 3 months. So you will see that. If nothing happens and we can't convince government to change, then of course we continue with a legal action. Although the first prize is to get a kind of political solution. So that is on the one side. On the other side, of course, we will start, and we know we must get answers that's not in the states here. And this BELA bill is not applicable on independent schools or private schools. So the fact of the matter is we must get answers there as well. So I just want to re-emphasize the importance for us as an Afrikaans community, as Afrikaners, to on the one side to fight, and on the other side to build. But at the end of the day, what we know is the next generation will have good quality Afrikaans education, and we will just see how it will play out. Hopefully, it's through a political settlement, otherwise through a court fight, or then simply by building your own.
Well, and that good quality education in the mother tongue Afrikaans doesn't preclude learning other languages, specifically English or maybe some.
Not at all.
Yeah, exactly. So, of course, because the argument's going to be made by folks is that, well, English is the language of aviation, of science, of space, of the internet, of commerce. All of that's true, but that doesn't mean that if it's not your mother tongue, you should ignore your mother tongue. You can also become conversant in English, but that's something that comes after you begin to master. I mean, I can only imagine trying to understand the genitive, the dative, the accusative, the nominative, all these different cases in a language growing up. I mean, I certainly in English didn't understand any of that in high school. It wasn't until I learned German that I began to understand grammar, because I had to, because German, you have to understand it because the darn articles change. In Afrikaans, it's just die. In English, it's just the. But that isn't the case in German. It's der, die, das, der, and des, and denen, denen. Oh, my goodness. And you need to know that. So anyway, but Dirk, thank you so much for your time. Bye-bye, Donkey. I appreciate it. Hopefully this will clarify what's going on with the BELA bill, or BELA law, I should say, for a lot of folks here, because it's important to understand it's law, but two aspects of it being delayed. Now, I raised a question yesterday about, can the president just do that? I'm not a constitutional attorney, so I reached out to a constitutional attorney I know in South Africa, and he did, in fact, or she, it might be a she, they did confirm that, in fact, that the president does have the authority to set aside and delay implementation of aspects. And I said, wow, that's nice. I mean, for decades, we've begged for the line item veto here in America for the president. That's essentially a line item veto. What a nice tool for the president of South Africa to have. I think the next job I want is president of South Africa so I can have a line item veto.
Please come.
All right, folks. With that, that's Dirk. I started to say Uman. It's not Uman. It's Dirk Hermann. I had to catch myself there. But again, thank you very much. We appreciate it. And we'll stay tuned for more developments on this.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. I'll let you drop off and then I'll wrap up the broadcast here. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, folks. As I said, Chief Executive Officer of the Solidarity Movement, Dr. Dirk Hermann there. Hermann. God bless it. I got to correct myself again. Dr. Hermann. Got that stuck in my head here. Let me, you got him trapped on the screen here too, so I'll get him into the waiting room. Boy, I really messed that up, didn't I? CEO of the Solidarity Movement, Dr. Dirk Hermann. And thank you all for tuning in. I hope you appreciate it. I'm going to make a short video after this regarding what was going on in the chat. So look for that coming up. It won't be my news broadcast, but I will be doing a broadcast here in just a couple of minutes. So thanks a lot, folks. And my thanks to the CEO of Solidarity for sharing with us the aspects of that. We brought out several points of the BELA law, including the language aspect, homeschooling, criminalizing parents for their children not being in school, and centralization of all the processes, including procurement, all of which matter. So thank you all so much for being here. I will be back on the air within the next 10 minutes for another short broadcast live to discuss what was going on in the chat here. So thank you all so much. And again, my thanks to the folks at Solidarity for sharing that. We'll catch you here shortly if you want to tune in, and the news will be at the top of the hour. God bless. Be safe out there, folks.